Hey there everybody. Today we're back to ranking my favorite FFG competitive LCGs, and my number 5 is Warhammer Conquest. Warhammer Conquest was released in 2014 and it ended in 2017, so only about 2.5 years of products being released for it, and that's due to Games Workshop and FFG. They had a union together making various games in their line, and then they decided to split, and therefore FFG owning the game as far as mechanics and Games Workshop owning the rights to the IP Warhammer World. FFG is no longer allowed to release any products for the Warhammer universe, to include re-releasing products that they originally had an agreement to sell. So this one was doing, I think, pretty good actually at the time. I don't think it was coming to a place where, you know, they couldn't actually didn't have the people wanting to play. So that is the reason why this one ended up ending versus the way Warhammer Invasion, it just kind of came to an end because other games like Netrunner, Star Wars, and Warhammer Conquest, well, the first two were out and doing very well, and then this one was about to come out, and so I think they just ended Warhammer Invasion. But as far as Conquest goes, it just ended because of that rights agreement there ended. So during that 2.5 years, they released 3 cycles and 2 deluxe expansions. There's 9 different factions in this one, 7 in the original box, and 2 were delivered. The I can't remember their name now, the Necrons and the Tyranids. They both had their own deluxe expansions, and unlike the other ones, they, like Warhammer Invasion, they did not release those as another core to where you had to buy multiple copies, but they released it as a deluxe expansion where they gave you all the copies of the cards. So as far as getting into this one now goes, you can get into it if you can find the core sets for a reasonable price. A lot of the battle packs, especially from the first and second cycles, are still relatively cheap. We're talking about somewhere between $5 and $8 for a lot of them. At the time I ended up collecting all of it back in 2018, some of the packs were as cheap as $3. The deluxe expansions were probably in the low 20s, and now it's ramped up just a little bit as it's getting harder to find, to about $30 for the deluxe expansions, and you know, about $8 on for the packs. Now the third expansion was the third cycle was the last that they released, and when that happens, they don't do more re-releases, so there's not as much product out in the world, so therefore you end up getting it to where those are hot commodities, and they're, if you can find any, they're going to be pretty expensive for that last cycle there. But for 2 deluxe expansions and 2 cycles, you can definitely get your fill of the game to, you know, probably a good 300-400 games if you have the same kind of replayability as I do, where I really want to, you know, hone my skills at a particular card pool for quite some time and see what all the different factions do. Obviously, one challenge with 2 cycles in this game is that it's spread across 7 factions plus neutral cards. So you're kind of spreading the load, because those packs, they usually have 1 or 2 cards for each faction out of those 60 card packs. But in this one, they're having to spread that a little bit more. So you're not going to see, if you want to play just one faction, you're not going to kind of see that pickup and a lot more cards to deck build with if you're just looking at one faction. For the Warhammer universe, as far as theme, I like the art on this so much better. I don't really have a super big affinity to Warhammer. I've never played the miniatures game, even though I kind of would like to. Unfortunately, at this point, I've kind of went down a money pit of my own with LCGs and board games, and I know that would just ramp things up and add another collectible component to my collection that would cost a large, quantity of money. So if I ever got a chance to play it, though, I'd be happy to. But the universe doesn't blow me away by any mean. But the art and the space portion of the Warhammer universe is far better. Really, every one of these cards in this game, I don't see any that are kind of got like very few. There's a couple that I'm not a huge fan of, but for the most part, I'd say probably 90% of the art in this game, if not more, is like catches my eye and it gets me thematically engaged with the game. So as far as the mechanics go, again, I'm going to have to go into a little bit of the mechanics here to tell you the things that I really, really love. But this is not a full tutorial by any means. Before I get into the mechanics, though, let me just say this. There is a group called Apoca or Apoca, I don't know how to say it. I'll have the links in the descriptions to some of their site and everything, that ends up producing a good, they've been producing expansions of this, and they have a number of them, so you could easily add to your card pool after you got those first two sets and continue to play if you could find some people to play with. There is a Discord server. That Discord server probably has, a few hundred people on it, probably a good 40 people active on it, maybe a little bit more. I don't want to undersell that Discord server. It is it's a good community there. You can ask questions about rules and talk about old metas and things like that. There's people very knowledgeable there. So and then they have the game on Tabletop Simulator, so you can go on there and play games on Tabletop Simulator, and you can find games on that Discord server. So this one is much more accessible than Warhammer Invasion. It's not the biggest community out of the LCGs, but it certainly has a good enough community that, and the price of the expansions and all are relatively cheap, so that you could get into this one or even go online and play some games and see if it's something you're interested in. They also have a deck building site called Traxis Sector. And that site has a lot of, not a lot, but a good number of decks from different times in the game that you could go and grab if you didn't want to deck build, and just test out some decks and get started. So that said, it is much more accessible, which is a big plus for me as far as the community over Warhammer Invasion. Let's get into mechanics, and I'll tell you what I like about this game. Honestly, before I get started, I'll just say this. There's nothing in this game versus the other games that is super, super unique to where it just absolutely wows me as far as mechanics go, but it's just a good, solid mechanical game that offers some great decisions and playability. And it is, it's at number 5. And I can't say if Warhammer Invasion would ever take it over. I've only got about 20 games of this one and 12 games of Warhammer Invasion, so the verdict's still kind of out on that. But I will say I definitely like the art and stuff better than this one, and the accessibility. I hope I do get to put in some good games of this and kind of work through the card pool. I have heard that the core experience in this one isn't as good as it isn't as good, and I know a couple of other ones the core experiences was much better to me. And so maybe adding those cards from the card pool will really ramp things up and have, some unique archetypes of decks that really, catch my eye. All right, I know I said I was going to get into mechanics like 3 minutes ago, so let's get going here. So in this game, this is unique to this game. You have these locations here, and you have 10 of them. And each of these locations, which are unique, have different symbols up here, red, green, or blue, and they have a number of combinations of that. This one only has one red, this one has a green and a blue, this one has all three. And what you're trying to do throughout the game, one way to win this game, there's two ways besides, I think, milling your deck. I can't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure milling your deck wipes you out too, is to either collect at least three of these that have matching symbols, meaning you get 3 or more agendas and at least 3 of those have a green symbol on it. So you got to collect 3 greens, 3 blues, or 3 red planets here to win the game. And again, they can have multiple symbols. And then the other way is to take this warlord here. This warlord has special abilities that affect throughout the game. It's got some damage. It's got some attack and health here. It tells you start with 7 cards and 7 resources at the beginning of the game. If this warlord gets damaged for 7 health, it flips over to its bloodied size. All the core ones lose their ability here, and then it has 1 damage and 5 health. And so now if you beat them again, you end up defeating the warlord and you can win that way as well. So that's the 2 ways to win, which kind of keep things in balance to where you have to really be careful not to put your warlord in harm's way, but also take advantage of their special abilities and things like that. So each round, you are going to go through a number of phases, right? The deployment phase, the command phase, the combat phase, and then the headquarters, which is where you just kind of refresh everything and handle some admin stuff. So in the deployment phase, again, you got 7 cards. You're going to spend these resources to put units, supports. Supports are like, they're like locations and things like that go down here to, just give you a long-term benefits and things like that goes in your headquarters. Units and attachments, they end up going out here on a location. And this is semi-unique to this game. There's there's another one that does it that we'll get to later, but most of the games do not have this. There's this back and forth of playing units. So it's not like in Warhammer Invasion where I play all my units and then I attack. It's literally deployment. Opponent can deploy a card, you deploy a card, opponent deploys a card, and so there's this back and forth here with event action and things like that going on as well. And there's a lot of strategy in that, because you can also, besides playing cards out here, you can also play events. You can also take actions on cards. Let's say if a card has an action or ability, you can use that on your turn instead to kind of wait it out and see where your opponent goes, so that you can react accordingly to placing your guys more strategically. So there's a lot of good strategy just in the deployment phase, to include something we'll get into a little bit later, which is whenever you can do a certain sort of win, and we'll go to in a minute, of these planets, you get certain resources. So only, and I'm getting into this a little early, but only the first planet gets to go to somebody's victory pile when they win it. The rest of them just give you a small bonus. So again, you're looking at symbols on these cards for your set collection, which is a component of this. You're looking at, I don't need to win this one, or I might not can win this one, so I'm going to put units out here to set up for future battles at first planets, to give my the chance to win the objectives I need, or the planets I need to win the game. Those are all very important strategic decisions, and I find it quite challenging. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm absolutely terrible at this game, but just that part right there is enough strategy just about to, and tactics to, give you a lot of decision making just in that space. The other thing is, then you move to the command struggle. And during the command struggle, you got this dial 1 through 5, and you basically pick a planet where your warlord's going to go. Your warlord and the other opponent sends their warlord to a location. when your warlord goes to a location, if the other warlord's not there, you automatically win those card draw and resource bonuses. This one has 0 card draw and 2 resources, which is, this is how you get your extra card draw. This is how you get more resources. Otherwise, at the end of the round, you're getting 2 cards and 4 resources. So all of that adds another element of where do I put my warlord at, to include any place a warlord's at besides the first planet always has a battle. Even if there's nobody there, then the planet goes away. But if one of these sides, either side has a unit there, they end up winning that planet, or they end up fighting for it if they both have units there. But your warlord will automatically initiate a battle at one of these other places, and if you win that battle, you end up getting this special ability here. This one says move a non-warlord unit you control to a planet of your choice. So this gives you all kinds of bonuses. This one says take one of your opponent's resources, so you're getting more bonuses by winning battles with your warlord, and you're also setting up other units besides your warlord. It comes back to your headquarters every end of the round here, or after a battle, but other units get to stay out on all of these except for the first planet. So that command out phase is a great bluffing thing, especially if your warlord's damaged severely. You're not wanting to send it into the battle necessarily, and your opponent's trying to figure out where they can go to hit that warlord. There's a lot of great strategy in the command out phase as well, to include, like I said, getting those resources and putting units in future planets is huge as far as you setting up and not just winning that first planet, and then your opponent's got a massive resource advantage. It's got units and all the rest of them. You're about to get, stomped. And so it's just, unless your deck actually works like that, which there are some factions that have different mechanics, obviously. So with all of that, we hadn't even got to the combat, and there's just phenomenal decision making as to where your folks go, and how do you utilize all your special abilities and everything to get that resource advantage as well as that unit advantage going forward throughout these. At the end of the round, you also flip over a new one. There's 7 total in the game, 10 total, 3 of them get out, so it's a somewhat randomized setup of which 7 planets you're going to have each turn and what order they're in. So the next thing is, again, I've already talked about the set collection. There's no hand limit, so you can just draw up as much as you want and have those cards in hand. The game plays in 30 to 45 minutes, which is a great time for this one. Again, depending on the decks, if you're playing 2 aggro decks, you could probably look at 25, 30-minute games on the regular. If there's some type of control decks that really go for the long game, you could be looking at longer, and that all depends on player time as well. But once you know what you're doing and you know the cards, you could easily punch out a game of this in 30 minutes, which is about a great time for LCGs, really, because that offers you short enough play time where you can punch out a lot of games in a couple of hours and really get that repetitive, play time. But it also gives you enough of a time frame to where it's not this super hard. There's some pretty epic punches in this game, but it's not just these constant crushing blows, and there's a little bit more of a balance to the game where it's not just like one big move ends up destroying you, even though that can happen, but it usually happens to bad players who aren't knowing the card pool, right? And so once we get into combat, again, this comes down to it's once again a back and forth thing. You got a bunch of units here, and these aren't even units, but I'm just putting some cards here, and they're at a planet, and your warlord's here, so a battle's going to happen here. Basically, you can do a number of things, and again, I'm not going into the rules like I want to, so that you can get a full picture. But there's a tutorial, there's a link to a YouTube video I'll put in the description that goes over the flow of the game and the rules in probably about, I think, 12 minutes or something. It's from FFG, so I'll put that in the description. But ultimately, you're doing a back and forth attacking. So if I attack with this unit and it has a certain amount of damage, I can put let's just say I had 2 damage, it'd do 2 damage to that. If that unit's still alive after that 2 damage, then it can, whoever you want to attack, can attack anybody on my side. So you're really having to make some really amazing decisions along with events in your hand, playing events in between that, playing, taking advantage of actions and how your different factions work. Like the orcs, as more damage they get, the more damage they can do to you. So knowing how to prevent that damage. And also, a lot of these cards have these shield icons up here in the top left. And whenever you can play one of those when a unit attacks, and you can basically negate that damage there. So knowing when to play those, how to understanding that you're going to lose an attachment or an event that does something beneficial for you long term, to shield that defender so that it doesn't take the damage, so that you can then strike with it or use its ability. All of those things in combat are unbelievable decisions to make. Again, I can't speak highly enough to the amount of impactful decisions you got every single minute of this game, and there's a lot of them to make. And there's the cards you have, and just like so much going on here that is really challenging, but not to a place where you can't just dig in and start playing and kind of learn from your mistakes. So it's not like overwhelmingly complex like say a heavy Euro game, but it's relatively easy to master the rule set, but it's super hard to really learn how to manipulate the board and make those decisions so that you can come out the winner. So, Warhammer Conquest. If I could ever get past the core set and put down 150 games, could this one go up on the list? Maybe, but I doubt it could go higher than maybe number 4, because number 3 through 1 are just absolutely amazing to me. But it could overtake 4 potentially, and we'll get into that later. But again, it's at number 5, but it is a great game, and especially if you like Warhammer at all, I would highly recommend you check this one out. And again, you can still find people to play. You're not going to get that LCG game store playing every Thursday night, getting good with decks, and then really stepping out. But if you have somebody you can play in person, and you're willing to play on Tabletop Simulator for some, some other for some games for repetition, and then play with 1 or 2 people that you have in person, I highly recommend this one for you to check out. So that's my number 5, Warhammer Conquest. We'll catch you next time for number 4.